Good evening, folks. If you're like me, you like a good ghost story. Quite often when it gets late at night or you're on a camping trip, people like to tell stories. And certainly when you're a lot younger and you have a much more active imagination, you quite often believe you've seen something that's unexplained. And as you get older, a little bit less imaginative and perhaps more scientifically minded, you'll quite often write off those childhood memories. So I've got plenty of memories from my childhood where I had a really intense interest in parapsychology, which for those of you that don't know is the study of paranormal phenomena. And I was very, very interested in it as a child. As I got older, perhaps a little bit more positivistic in my mindset, I started to discount a lot of my childhood memories. And that stuff that my younger brother would call woo-woo. But I still have a lot of interest in the woo-woo side of life. And I sort of think that life has kind of lost a dimension in its very positivistic, materialistic aspects of the way it views the world, the way most people view the world. And so up until probably a year or two ago, I'd heard lots of stories from other people and experiences that they had had, but I couldn't honestly say that I'd had an experience of my own. So tonight I'm going to tell you 3 stories, and 2 of them are from people that I know in my family, and the final story is up until, like I said a couple of years ago, I hadn't had an experience as an adult that I could definitively point to and say, gee, that was very hard to explain. So my final story is that moment where I've had that experience, and I wasn't alone when I had it, which sort of made it a little bit more believable in my eyes, because if I had been there by myself, I could perhaps have decided there was another reason for it. But anyway, we'll get on to the stories. And the first story or stories revolve around my auntie Rita, who was known by all her sisters as being someone who was very psychic in her during her lifetime. She had a lot of instances of precognition, predicting things that would happen in the future. And it's quite well documented that, you know, when her parents passed away, she would know that before the phone rang that this had actually happened, and would say, you know, mum's sitting at the end of the bed or dad's sitting at the end of the bed. I did hear a story of one time when she moved into an apartment, I think it was in Perth, and there'd been a suicide in that particular apartment. And obviously this person had moved out a long time ago and things were empty, but while she was there, she found a suicide note. Now, we're not sure whether she may have written that note while she was in a trance state, because she would quite often do automatic writing. She was very interested in spiritualism and seances and whatnot. But anyway, when the note was brought to the police station, it was a suicide note, and it was written in the hand of the person that had committed suicide. So may have been missed and fallen out of the back of a drawer or whatever. So hey, that's not definitive evidence of, you know, psychic phenomenon, let's say. I do have an interesting story about when she stayed with us at our house in Auburn. And she'd been there a little while, and she was having a glass of red wine in our lounge room, which used to be the kitchen of the house. And as my mum walked in, she said, "Oh, there was a little girl that was there, but she flew up the chimney," and proceeded to describe this young lady who was dressed in black. Young lady had a limp, didn't want to be there. She was talking about how she's not happy there. And mum's like, "I don't want to hear it. I still have to live here. We haven't seen anything. We haven't felt anything. just leave it alone. And Mum probably would have forgotten that story had she not, a few weeks later, been getting off the bus. And in Auburn, we had private buses, and the bus drivers would basically stop wherever you wanted them to. So he stopped right out the front of our house, and as my mum got up to get off the bus, an old lady reached over and grabbed her and said, "Do you live in that house?" And my mother said, "Yes, as a matter of fact, I do." And she proceeded to tell her very, very quickly that when she was a little girl, she used to stay at that house, and that they had a young lady who was their house help, would normally dress in black, and she had polio, and so she had polio, so she had a limp. She used to limp around the kitchen. So that was Mum's experience of one of the experiences we've had with Auntie Rita, and I'm sure that there's probably many others with her. So that's the first story, and like I said, that's something that someone else has had as an experience, and it's certainly not a direct experience of that particular phenomenon. I spent 10 years at night time, working till late into the night at the Callan Park Mental Hospital. I also, at one point in time, was painting a room which tiled floor to ceiling, and full of old clothes from about the 1950s up until about the 1980s. And as it turned out, the room was the morgue for the Callan Park mental institution, and also spent a lot of nights in various other wings of this hospital and the abandoned buildings as well, because we was used as storage. We were in and out of those buildings late at night. And so if you were going to have an experience, or you were someone that had a little bit of psychic ability, you would expect that would be the place where it would happen. So you could forgive me for becoming a little bit less believing in the chance of it happening to me. At any rate, I probably became a little bit skeptical about the whole situation. But I must say that there was many a time late at night where I would be in a building cleaning brushes at a sink after we'd painted a room or done something, and the hair would literally stand up on the back of my neck, and I'd be like, someone's behind me, and I would keep turning around, but there was nothing there the whole time I was there. So I can say that I never had any experiences that you would expect to have in a location that would have to have a lot of troubled souls, and in the time that the people were there. It was used as a mental hospital from the late 1800s till about the 80s. So you'd expect some paranormal phenomena in a place like that, but there wasn't any. So anyway, we've done story 1. Now story 2 is a little bit more interesting, and it was one of my brother-in-laws whose family went away, and this particular brother-in-law is not very interested in paranormal phenomenon. He's doesn't really read about it, or certainly not as interested as say I am. I've read a lot of books on it, and I was very interested in the poltergeist phenomenon, what causes it, all that sort of stuff, how it starts, what manifests during a typical haunting. And he had gone away with his family for a family holiday, and he was staying in I guess it would be like a guest house. And on the first night, he has a lot of sisters and a brother, but the sisters were screaming and yelling and having terrible nightmares and waking everybody up, and it was just a very unsettled night. And the next morning, the kitchen was absolutely trashed. There was salt and pepper all over the table, and cupboard doors open, and their father, who's Eastern European, of course, started yelling at them and saying, "What the hell are you kids doing? Look at this mess," etc., etc. And they're like, "We didn't do it." He didn't believe them. So then the following night, they were all sleeping in the room, and I think a number of them were together. And my brother-in-law started feeling someone pinching him really, really hard. And started screaming at his sisters, "Stop that!" And they're like, "Stop what?" And so eventually there was a big, fight broke out. Dad came into the room and he said, "They're pinching me." And then while he was standing there, he felt it again. And literally, as they were watching his arm, he would be pinched and the welts were rising on his arm. And needless to say, they got out of there really quick. And that sort of, disturbance in a kitchen, doors opening, salt and pepper being tipped out, pinching, is something that you quite often hear about in really intense episodes of poltergeists manifestations. So that was quite an interesting story, told with complete honesty, and I certainly believed it. And so I thought, well, there's a great instance of that type of haunting. And suffice to say, up until that point, I'd never experienced any paranormal phenomenon that would be termed poltergeist, or objects moving or sounds being made. So that was story number 2. And like I said, these stories are close to home. They're not the sort of thing you see on YouTube at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'm sure that any sort of very rational scientific mind will perhaps come up with some explanation for maybe my Auntie Rita's story. But being pinched by something that's not there, you could say it was psychosomatic on the part of my brother-in-law, except of course that he's not highly strung. He's never had any other mental episodes. So that would be, in my reckoning, a very poor explanation of what happened. So this leads me to my experience. And like I said, it happened very recently. And we were on a cruise of the South Pacific on the Voyager of the Seas, I think it was. Can't actually remember the name of the ship. But it was a Caribbean cruise. And a few nights into the cruise, I heard a very loud rap on the door. It was kind of like that. It's very insistent. So it wasn't like noise that you might just hear on the ship. It was like someone wanted to know that, they wanted to come in. And as I opened my eyes, I was lying on this side of the bed and my wife was behind me, and I was looking towards the door where the sound had come from. Now the door didn't open, because if the door did open, you'd know, you'd hear it, you'd see it. And when it closes, it makes a very loud noise because it's fireproof and it's very heavy. But as I'm looking into the hallway towards the door, there's light coming in from underneath the bathroom door because we'd left the bathroom light on. And I can see somebody standing there, a clear silhouette. And I'm looking and I'm looking. And of course I start thinking, well, I've just woken up. So it could be a hypnagogic thing. I am not fully awake. I'm believing I'm seeing something, but it's not actually there. So I'm looking and looking and looking, and then I just think, I'm awake, I know I'm awake, and there's someone standing there. So I reach out to the bedside lamp and switch the light on. As soon as I switch the light on, there's nothing there. Now, obviously after seeing that, I switched the light off and on a few times to see whether perhaps there was a coat hanging there or something that would make me think that there was a person there, but there was actually nothing in the spot where I'd seen the figure. It was just clear hallway. And once again, if I was the only person that saw it, I'd be saying to myself, well, I just woke up, so I was still not fully awake and I was dreaming what I saw. That would be a great explanation, except that my wife from behind me says, did you see the guy standing in the hall? And at that moment, I knew, unless we had the same hypnagogic vision at the same time, and we both described a silhouette of a guy standing there. So once again, you can rationalize that away as two people having the same dream at the same time. I don't think that suffices as the explanation. She heard the sound, the knock, and she saw the figure. So we basically saw the same thing. Now, how do I feel about what I saw? I don't know. Was it just in my mind? It very well may have been just in my mind, except that it was in my wife's mind as well. So we both saw the same thing. So does it clear up for me what a ooh, the lights went out. Does it clear up for me what I actually saw? I believe I had a bona fide experience of something that was paranormal, that was able to make a noise and make itself known. It wouldn't be surprising that we would have seen that type of apparition on a ship, because the number of elderly people that cruise and the number of elderly people that pass away on cruises there's a lot. And to say that would be a place you would see something is not that it wouldn't be that unexpected. If you enjoyed these tales of the unexpected from a personal perspective, I'd like to do more, and please subscribe. I'm at about 600 subscribers, and with 400 more, Google can start buying me a beer again, which was a nice little bonus from this little project that I used to work on, this channel. But yeah, I'd like to do more of these, so like and subscribe, and let me know in the comment section whether you have any stories of your own. Put some links there if you like, because I'm really interested in this stuff, and I'd like to see what other personal stories people have, not stuff they've read on Reddit or heard through the grapevine, stuff that has personal significance. I think that is what really interests me, people's own personal stories, because most people, by the time they've lived a little bit of time in their life, have at least one thing in their life that's very hard to explain, and they're always very interesting stories to hear. So please send a link for that, and we'll see you in the next video. I might make another one like this. I've got probably a few more stories to tell, and if you've liked this one, I'll do another one. See you in the next one.